Hi everyone, doing another Bionicle review today. Don't actually have too many of these left in reserve. I've just about reviewed everything I had set aside for this purpose. Now I technically could still go and pick up more, find more online, but since I'm trying to fundraise for the new computer still, it seems like that would kind of defeat the purpose of using these to stall out time until I'm able to get the new computer. So with that in mind, if you would still like to donate to the fundraiser to that will still be linked down in the description. Today we are looking at the set Matoran Kazi, set number 8722. He released back in 2006 for $3.99. Now, the Matoran from this year are actually some of the more interesting Matoran that you can find. At the time they released, the big-sized sets were the villainous Paraka, and there were no other heroes released until the second half of that year with the Toa and Naika. So these little, powerless characters were the resistance against the villainous, big characters. And for that reason alone, that already makes them look cool. Anytime you have a underdog, underpowered hero going up against big, threatening odds, that's just super interesting. Additionally, they all had some fairly interesting builds. A lot of the Matoran, especially the ones from Metru Nui and even the ones that were released as Tohunga and as the Matoran with the 2003 sets, were all cookie cutter. A lot of the later ones were also somewhat cookie cutter. The following year, even though there were only two Matoran released at first and two released in a larger set, they still basically had the same build. So this wave of Matoran stand out in that they have different body types. These two have pretty similar ones, the way their arms are built, and I believe these four all do something similar where they're using one of the foot pieces as the main body as well, but there's plenty of variation in there on how they're constructed on some of the little details. He has the spikes on his shoulders. He doesn't. He and he are probably the most similar. The point at hand, though, is that they all have a unique build. This one in particular was one that I never had before, but always thought looked really interesting because of how different his body was from everything else. Now, I've not opened it yet, obviously, but I do have suspicions that there's going to be one big drawback to his build type. We will take a look and see if I'm correct or not in just a moment. But first, though, I do just want to take a quick look at the box. The front obviously has the cool stylized image of him up on the top, as well as the metal-looking background, just to emphasize the dystopic nature of the story that was being told that year. The side doesn't really have anything out of the ordinary. I already showed the back, but it does demonstrate the new island for the year, as well as where all of the characters would traditionally be located. Nothing too interesting on the top or bottom. But I say we just go ahead and jump right into opening this up. He is stuck to something in there. I wonder if the bag is stuck on the glue somewhere. Here, this might be it. Huh, that's interesting. There we go. That was a struggle. Let's put this guy together. And here we have Kazi in completion. Now you might be wondering why I have him in such a frankly strange pose. Well, that's what the instructions consider finalized. He has to T-pose to assert dominance. Obviously, I'm not going to leave him like this. I just think it was funny that the instructions left him that way. So all in all, I think he's pretty cool, although there are a few faults I want to point out. The first is that the instructions obviously leave him in kind of a janky position, but even when you line him up normally, it's still kind of strange. They've got his blades going to the side instead of the natural way you would want to hold a blade, or the way that he holds them in the pictures. And also his legs are just weird and crouched down like this. So what I'm going to do is actually just stand him upright. I'm going to take a look and see. That might be okay. Because of the piece it uses for his legs, it's not bad. We'll leave him leaning forward a little bit. One nice surprise I was not expecting in this was that the hands are actually a light gray and not the dark gray we typically saw around the time. These were not the most common at that point, and I don't think they were still terribly common after, so it's nice to see that. There, now he's looking a little bit more normal. I do, however, want to confirm that my suspicion was correct on one particular flaw, and that is that this build, because of the way it works, leaves no skull. He's just an empty mask. At the time that this came out, there wasn't really a good fix for this either. Nothing that would be simple, and I kind of suspected as much, but unlike the others who you could give an eyepiece to give some eye color if you had one of the shorter eyepieces that came out in 2007, there's just no way to do that with him. Interestingly, though, some of the more recent pieces from Bionicle Gen 2 would actually work perfectly. I'm going to do a jump cut here to show you him wearing one of those. I'm borrowing Pohatu's 2015 skull from a previous review to show that, yeah, this in fact... Oh, sorry about that, Kazi. This could, in fact, work if this piece had been around as early as 2006, which obviously it wouldn't. Technically 2005, right at the end of the year is when these dropped, late December, so if only... I keep knocking everything around today. If only you time traveled 10 years in the future, you'd have a good piece to work with it. But that's obviously not going to be the case. So the mask is complaint number one, the one big flaw that I wanted to point out. The second one is not quite as obvious and really isn't quite as big for some people, but it's still one I want to make clear. To do so, though, I'm going to need to show you the box with the rest of the characters again, because it's more a problem with the entire range and not necessarily exclusive to this Matoran. When you look at all 6 of these, despite their immense originality, their interesting builds and colors, there's one massive glaring detail that is entirely carried over from the Ko-Matoran, and that is their masks. All 6 of their masks are the exact same color that the Ko-Matoran were 2 years prior. When I was a kid and I first saw these before I knew what the story was going to be, it even confused me because I was wondering if it was still somehow continuing the Ko-Matoran's story, which didn't make any sense since these were supposed to be Matoran. Obviously that's not the case. It was just the lazily reusing all of the pieces. Now, if they had used all 6 of the same pieces but done them in different colors, that would have been acceptable. That's what we saw for previous Matoran releases. If his mask had actually been in green on him and his mask was in blue on her, that would be fine. That would be acceptable. Instead, though, they just recycled all of the masks. And that is probably the biggest missed opportunity that these things had. Because aside from some mobility issues, some posability in the arms, which frankly is kind of the case for a lot of the early Matoran, this is a really cool set. These were all really cool sets. In fact, I loved these so much as a kid that I actually had 4 of the 6. The only ones I didn't have were this one and the blue one, Dalu. Obviously, it's just down to 1 now, although her build kind of looks awful, so I'm probably just going to stick to the 5. I don't really care that much about Dalu's build. But yeah, enough rambling. All in all, I think this is a very cool set. I really like the originality in the build. I just wish it didn't have a few pretty basic but glaring problems.